Everybody. Hello, my name is James Stapleton, and I'm the Senior Strategic Advisor for the Alliance of Biodiversity International and CIAT, and I will be your moderator for the next session. If you'll just hold on we are waiting for one of the speakers still to arrive. So if you'll give us a couple of moments, I think I'd like to have all of the speakers here by the time we kick off. So bear with me for, don't go to another competing event. This one's much nicer. La Fédération bancaire. Andrea. Oh, no. Sorry. I thought you were Andrea.
No.
I'm not here missing.
You can be here.
What are you?
Oh, there she is. There she is. There she is. She has
Okay.
arrived.
Okay. I can see the remaining panelists. So, as I said, my name is James Stapleton from the Alliance of Biodiversity International and CIAT, which is one of the 15 or two of the 15 CGIAR centers. So I'm here today to have a conversation about unlocking finance for land restoration. For the last number of years, we've been talking about all of the different Rio conventions on land, on biodiversity, on climate, and now we're trying to bring them together in a catalytic way, trying to bring in climate finance into land for land restoration to be able to catalyze change. We have a lot of solutions that have been developed, and finance has always been a challenge. And one of the core parts of this work will be to work with both the public and the private sector to be able to develop investment vehicles to be able to move forward. Before I start, I'd like to thank Brazil for their leadership on this initiative. We've been working together, I think, now for the last 8 or 9 months, trying to bring their own ideas about what makes sense for them, but what also makes sense for the international agenda, but also to align it to what's been happening before. So we're not bringing in yet another COP initiative, which comes out of nowhere and is disconnected to what's happened before. So what I'd like to do now is to invite all of the speakers onto the panel. Pedro Cunto, who's the special advisor to the Minister of Agriculture and Livestock on Brazil's new Green Way investment program. Pedro, if you could maybe take a seat. Wendy Francesconi, the senior environmental scientist of the Alliance of Biodiversity International and CIAT. Sebastian Solé. Solé, I got the pronunciation. Title, Sebastian.
Sustainable Finance Director at the French Banking Federation.
Thank you. Andrea Resende, Investment Manager with the Impact Earth. And before I go over to you with the questions, I'd like to ask Martial Bernot, who is the team leader and head of climate change at the Office of Environment, Climate and Biodiversity of the FAO. And over to you, Martial, to give us an overview of this initiative of Brazil, RAIZ, Resilient Agriculture Investment for Net-Zero Land Degradation. Martial.
Test, okay. Okay, first of all, just to thank the organizer, CGIAR and Brazil for having this event. So I'm from FAO, but you will see the presentation is the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock. So here I have a different hat. I've been asked by our partner from MAPA to present what RAIZ is. You will see a global multilateral for food security and climate. So I will do my best to, and I hope Bruno Brazil will not kill me at the end. So now, but just to present that initiative, so on resilient agriculture investment for net zero land degradation, as you have said, it has been a long way, a lot of discussion between MAPA, FAO, CGIAR, and other partners that you will have all the logo after. And basically, what you have here, this is a result of that maturation process. So it has been really a long maturation to arrive at that. So why? So the first was the why. The why, I guess, is obvious. You see more than 20% of global farmland is currently degraded. And you have here one of the RAIZ mapping tool that has been set up by one of the partners of that consortium. So you see basically on cropland and pasture land, this is where we are focusing the attention for this for RAIZ. So you have number 1 billion hectares. So you see the number is not million, it's really billion. So worldwide, it's really impressive. Climate change is adding a burden on top of that. So land degradation is happening since years, but with the worsening of the climate in the recent decade, it has been even worse. And you can see decrease in crop yield from 10 to 50%, with countries being impacted, and some hotspot of some subnational level, it can reach nearly 100% of land destruction. The cost of that, 23 trillion. So it's you see the level of the economic, and those are the economic costs, and you have the non-economic costs that can be embedded into that, and this is mostly lives or assets also that are being lost. So having this in mind, there was really that discussion having an action agenda related to the UNFCCC, the climate change COP, but not forgetting the other important convention, because the solution that we will have to bring or to build should be cross-cutting and not work in isolation. So you see already consistently what RAIZ is consistent with also the UNCCD target, so the Convention on Land on Degradation and Desertification, where you have a target under that convention of 250 million hectares of farmland. It's the LDN, is a land degradation neutrality target, and this is also the RIAD agenda that have been adopted at last COP in the Saudi Arabia. CBD target, so you have here one of the target of the Montreal framework. Also, it was a recent decision was implemented on that global biodiversity framework. So RAIZ is not only responding to the climate change, but also offering elements that can connect with the UNCCD and the CBD. Finance, I guess this is something we will discuss a lot here. You have some numbers, and you see the needs on top, and basically the different part that what we have so far, and you see the public finance is really small. What we still have also in private finance, actual 2022 is 4. So we need to scale up. We need to attract finance investment to that sector to help in the land degradation, in the fighting of the land degradation. So all RAIZ basically want to work. And you have here, it's very simple. It's even, you can say, too simple. Public finance, private finance, on how to blend that to reach the farmer. But this is basically the equation that we have to solve. So how we can have flow of money that is also reaching the people that need, not only having flow of money that probably will not serve the purpose. So this is basically what the different proponents of RAIZ really want to see, having something farmer-centric. And the most important is that aspect. So farmer, you see now put together the same with RAIZ in the middle, and it's not new in the sense that we are just entering in that. It's built on all that is already existing, on creating that tissue, that connectivity on the different initiatives from private, public, banks, MDBs, agri-PDBs, National Agricultural Public Development Banks that act at a national level. So putting all those different actors into a same framework, trying to solve the equation that I saw to you. So RAIZ have been developed in 4 pillars that you have here. First, understand, to map where we will act. We need to understand where we will have to direct the investment, to identify and cost the investable solution, because it's not all solutions have the same cost, can be deployed at the same scale, they do not have the same potential. Then co-design the investment. And when I say co-design, in the co, you have the farmer. So all with the people that will receive, we can design the real investment mechanism we need. And then a knowledge sharing, because there is already a lot of happening, and we cannot reinvent just the wheel. We have to build on all the different initiatives that exist in the world. So here you have the 4 pillars again, but with, I was mentioning, a lot of different actors. So you can see here all different actors with some map against also the service that will be offered. From my side, I'm more on the fast partnership. That is a COP2COP vehicle that have been set at COP27 under the Egyptian presidency. And since then, we are embedding the different initiatives connected to the UNFCCC and when related to access to finance for agriculture. That's why MAPA contacted us early in the process, and CGIAR is fast, also fast, sitting in the board representing the science. Fast is trying to also bridge all those different actors. But now with that particular initiative, we are really extending on network, and you have here, you can see all the different logos, so I will not read all of them. So if you want to know more, there is a website and with some information where we will put the way we are, when we will move in that process, more information. And you can also register to be involved, to receive regularly information. Because RAIZ is not just a fireworks at that scope, is to stay with a plan of at least 3 years, and we commit to report at every next COP. We don't know yet where. The COP after in Ethiopia, this is already decided, on the COP after. So this is really the idea to, it's not just having a new momentum, it's really starting something that will link the different COP presidency on with a clear objective. So with that, muito obrigado, qualquer coisa. E como posso falar para meus amigos brasileiros, desculpe qualquer coisa.
Thank you, Martial. Thank you. And you see, so it's quite complicated. There are a lot of parts elaborated into it. Understopping where the degraded land is, mapping the areas for investment, the partners, and then from our perspective in CGIAR, bringing the science to bear in the design of investment vehicles, and then sharing the knowledge, because we know we need to, there's a lot of this stuff already been out. So like, I'd like to start directly with you, Pedro, because Brazil is not starting this yesterday. You've begun this process around designing investment vehicles. So how is Brazil integrating land restoration into its national climate finance and investment strategies?
So good afternoon, everyone. Well, the Brazil has the Brazilian Green Way is our national program to recover degraded lands to agricultural producer.
Closer.
Much better. Okay. So as we was talking, in Brazil we have the the Brazilian Green Way is our program to recover the degraded lands to productive systems. The Brazilian Green Way can recover the lands for livestock, for agriculture, planted forests, integrated systems. And the requirements of the program are very rigorous, such as zero deforestation, at least 10 years, Even the part of the legal deforestation, the producer has the right to do. They cannot do it for 10 years. Annual greenhouse gas emissions balance, good agriculture practice, including bio-inputs, labor certification, and incentives for low carbon or carbon neutral production. All 100% verified. So the program helps to reduce emissions and prevent deforestation while increase the food and biofuel production, contributing to food security and energy transition. As we talk in Brazil, it's not conserve or produce. It's produce conserving. That's...
Thank you, Pedro. Wendy, Pedro mentioned at a certain point when he was talking about his objectives, he said 100% verifiable. We know that's a huge problem for investors. No, how can investors be sure that their investments are actually delivering returns, not just in the economics, but also in the co-benefits. So how, from your work, how can science-based monitoring and evaluation systems, including the use of AI, help governments and investors track progress, assess impact, and reduce investment risks?
Okay, thank you, James, for that question. So I have two hats. I'm representing two areas of work. One is I'm a senior environmental scientist within the multifunctional landscapes research area at the Alliance, but I'm also part of this impact hub for sustainable finance at the CGIAR level. And this team is working closely with the private sector to be able to generate the evidence that is required to develop financial mechanisms together to do not only financing of different small farm holders through agri-SMEs, but also engage in the monitoring, robust mechanisms for monitoring the impacts, social, environmental impacts that these investments have, in addition to financial returns. So actually, I would like to get started with the obvious issue in greenhouse gas emissions in agriculture, and that is that from the 25 to 35% greenhouse gas contributions that agriculture and food systems have on the global carbon emissions values, half of that is actually coming from land use change. So one issue that needs to be targeted is forest conversion, natural habitat conversion into agriculture. And that is happening at the small scale with small farmer holders, but also at the big scale with agribusinesses. With small farm holders, what happens is that over the many cycles of poor practices and land use, then you deplete soil resources, and then farmers need to, extend their practices and go into natural habitats, forest areas. So this negative down spiral cycle ends up leading to more deforestation. More deforestation ends up leading to more greenhouse gas emissions, and that ends up leading to greater climate risk and impacts on agriculture, and kind of like this negative loop happening over and over. From the large scale side, agribusinesses also implement extensive practices, extensive cattle ranching, non-sustainable, and they also have impact, but not in numbers as small farm holders, because there's many of them, and little by little leading to deforestation, but big corporations can deforest in large scale, having impact that is large both at large scale with agribusinesses and large because of numbers at small scale. So what we do, RAIZ is an initiative that is looking at restoring degraded land. A lot of that deforestation happens because the soil gets depleted, degraded, leading to that deforestation. But if we work on investments that restore degraded soil, degraded agricultural practices, then we're able to use the resources that have been allocated in perpetuity, right? With regenerative agriculture, not only sustainable at this moment, but we actually have to be net positive. So we need to actually now generate positive impacts. So that's where RAIZ comes in, right? RAIZ is an initiative that is being launched in this COP, and hopefully it will take momentum, just like the Tropical Forest Forever was first mentioned during G20. We have been talking about this. And in this COP meeting, it's also being launched to protect forest areas. But then what about the agricultural landscape? We need to then now look at how to restore those degraded areas in order to generate, greater investment in the implementation of intervention practices there. So Marshall, he mentioned 1 billion hectares of land, farmland has been degraded. That is equivalent to 40 to 60% of agricultural land. And that's huge. It's huge. And that's going to lead, if we don't address it, it's going to lead to more deforestation. So in RAIZ, this initiative that is trying to bring finance to invest in activities that restore degraded agricultural land, we have a role where we want to support the co-design of different financial mechanisms. With my sustainable final hat and the team that we have been working on the co-design with private sector of different impact investments fund that throughout the whole project cycle, from screening of businesses to impact monitoring, we support with science for decision making. We have tools that have been developed using the compendium of research that has been generated within the CGIAR for the last 30 years, using AI and learning language models to scan through all those databases to identify not only what are the best practices to be implemented for a specific crop in a specific location, but in response to climate risk, to climate impacts, environmental risk as well. And from there, we also provide support to the community of farmers through agri-SMEs, agricultural small and medium enterprises, for them to now incorporate best management practices in those areas, follow up with what would be post-investment assessments, and then generating the evidence of the impact of those interventions at baseline and following intervention implementation. So that is the work that we're doing. We have been supporting several funds, one here in Brazil, which is the Amazon Biodiversity Fund, that has been focused on conserving biodiversity with Andrea, actually an Impact Earth, looking at supporting business models that are sustainable, that give value to the forest, that give value to different products that are part of the socioeconomic infrastructure that maintaining and conserving forest areas, but also doing sustainable agriculture kind of has. So our role has in this RAIZ initiative is to become the science broker to support with the co-design of those financial instruments, but then also support the implementation of the different tools for risk assessment and impact evaluation.
Thank you. Thank you, Wendy. So moving from the science over to you, Andrea. Andrea, you're a partner of Alliance Biodiversity International and CGIAR in some of these impact investments. And so my question to you is, how can the impact investors balance the financial returns with the long-term environmental and the social impact?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Thanks for the invitation, for being here with you all. I am Andrea Rezende. I work for Impact Earth. We are an international fund manager, and we have a strong presence here in Brazil. We have offices in São Paulo, in the UK, and in Belém. We do advise exclusively the Amazon Biodiversity Fund, which is a $50 million fund for the Brazilian legal Amazon, and the fund is already reaching 185 million reais. It has reached today, invested in 11 different projects and companies, and I will explain a bit more our thesis. And we are reaching 200 million reais, which is $40 million invested by the end of this year. The type of projects, I will briefly explain the type of project, some examples, and then come to your question specifically. The thesis of the fund is completely integrated with the landscape approach, where you have the forest in the center and that you want to conserve, restore, and value the traditional livelihoods of traditional communities. Then you have smallholder agriculture, sustainable ag, and a layer of innovation here that you can also add value to the biodiversity value chain. And we do have some projects which I would like to mention and then come back to the answer. For example, we do invest in innovative agroforestry systems. Agroforestry has been researched for a long while, right? Decades. We do have research, but it's still, we don't still have a big player in the private market that has proven you can do it at a big scale to match these millions of hectares that's being said here. In none of our investments has this goal of proving it's possible to make agroforestry at scale. They have researched different consortiums and now are using cacao, banana, cassava, and forestry species. This company is called Belterra. ABF, the Amazon Biodiversity Fund, has invested in it initially, and now it has been has secured the BNDES, the Brazilian Development Bank financial line of 20 million US dollars, 100 million reais. So this is a bit, we also do have in the portfolio sustainable SAF, agroforestry systems with cacao in very small holders, with Cacao Amazonia. We do have also cafe agroforestry systems in the Amazonian region, combining conservation plus cafe agroforestry systems also in smallholders. And Macaúba, which is a promising sustainable aviation fuel in Inocas, Amazonia. It's in agro-silvio pastoril. I am just mentioning this so that we can have examples of businesses which are looking at combining generation of income. All of them, they do not operate like purchasing the land. They do operate making partnership with small and medium holders, be it agricultural partnership or land leasing, that you have different ways of doing. So the way we do structure the investments, it also matters. And then we come to the impact KPIs that are being monitored and the integration with Alliance Biodiversity. So those business, and that's the thesis of the investment, that it's possible to generate positive biodiversity impact, positive socioeconomic and social impact, and return for the investors. Of course, this is not a silver bullet, the expression in English, but it's an innovative way, and we do count with a lot of partners on this journey. This project was initially, it's a big partnership with CIAT and Alliance Biodiversity, also with the contribution originally from USAID. We do have DFC also as a guarantor for the fund. We do have private investors, L'Oréal Fund, ASN Impact Investors, and the Brazilian National Development Fund, as well as international family offices. And the super important also support on impact monitoring and impact design thesis of the fund that came from CIAT and the Alliance. And what we do, just super briefly, because I also need to pass the word, we do have very science-based measurement of eDNA on the field to prove there is actually increasing biodiversity impact. We do have KPIs that will monitor how much we are increasing the revenues for the smallholders, but also which percentage of the total return of the investment is going to the local stakeholders. So it's a combination. Since the design, we did have this partnership scientific to look at this impact, and now we are on the final phase of investment and starting monitoring the business for the next 5 to 7 years.
Thank you, Andrea. Sebastian, you're representing the Federation of Banks in France. What are you hearing here that resonates with the practices that you're already involved in, or in the direction that you would feel that you would like to take your clients? And what do you need then to go in that direction?
Yes, thank you. So there are two, so I represent French banks, but French banks in France and internationally. So some of them are already involved in Brazil, for instance. They have already thought quite a lot on what is zero deforestation and how can an international bank implement the zero deforestation target, which is quite tricky. There are two things that are very important for banks, and I would like to highlight here. First thing, at the core of each bank's business is there is assessment of risk and opportunities. So one of the quick questions for a bank, when a bank provides a credit to a client, the obvious question is, will the client will be able to reimburse this credit? So for this, we have to make a risk and opportunity assessment. What are the risks and what are the opportunity of the client? To what extent will it be able to reimburse the credit? So traditionally, this risk and opportunity analysis is mostly based on purely financial KPIs. And more and more, we have to take into account other KPIs, and some of them are related with land degradation, biodiversity degradation, resilience to climate change. And for instance, several French banks have developed what they call the Just Institute. So it's an institute that works with microfinance institutions. And we have developed a tool to assess, so it's dedicated to small farmers actually, and to assess the nature risk and climate risk for the small farmers. To what extent in 5 years, 10 years, nature degradation, land degradation, climate change will impact the business of these small farmers, and to what extent these small farmers should adapt the way they realize their business, their agricultural activities, to make sure that they decrease their risk towards the natural degradation, towards climate change. And so in this field, obviously, the land degradation is key. So we have to develop relevant tool to assess land degradation in the short, mid and short term, to see how our clients, smallholders in this case, can take into account this risk of land degradation. So it's first element is risk and opportunities. And the other very important thing for commercial banks is that they have to work in partnership, because banks are not specialists in land degradation. That's not their key business. And so there is one French bank, BNP Paribas, that has developed a very interesting tool in Poland. It's not in Brazil, but it's Poland. So their big client there is McCain. So it's one of the largest potato producers in the world. And so BNP Paribas has a partnership with McCain. McCain has many suppliers in Poland producing potatoes. And so McCain has partnership with its suppliers, obviously. And when the suppliers agrees to have long-term targets on biodiversity, on nature, on soil preservation, BNP Paribas, through partnerships through McCain, provides to these clients, to these suppliers to McCain, dedicated loans with specific impact KPIs to incentivize these potato producers, these suppliers of McCain, to incentivize them into adopting more resilient, more nature-based, more scientific-based ways of producing potatoes to decrease the risk of land degradation. So it's really a true three-part partnership with the bank, BNP Paribas, the agro-business industry, McCain, and the smallholders that produce potato. All this based on science as much as possible to adopt long-term ways of producing potatoes to decrease land degradation. So it has been done in Poland. It could be done with many other sectors in Brazil. And for instance, French banks have quite a huge challenge in Brazil, because since they finance clients involved in the agribusiness in Brazil, they are attacked by NGOs of financing deforestation, because for some NGOs, when you work in it's not my point of view, but for some NGOs, as soon as you finance agribusiness in Brazil, you are responsible for part of the deforestation in the Amazon. So we have to show them that we implement a science-based traceability principles to make sure that when a bank finances the agribusiness in Brazil, it does not finance deforestation. It's very tricky. This 100% traceability is very tricky. But okay, fortunately, some organizations try to develop some ways to increase this traceability, and it's very important for the commercial banks to have this kind of tools.
Thank you, Sebastian. And we you now have the Brazilian Green Way. You have a Eco Invest that's moving that forward. But what are the policy and or the fiscal incentives that are proving effective to attract the private sector capital for land restoration for this?
First of all, it's important to say this kind of recover land in Brazil are very profitable in long term. We need time to pay the money, but it's very profitable. We have in Brazil more or less 100 million hectares of degraded lands, and our target is 40 million. $60 billion to reach that. So it's a very huge program. We start with an auction of Eco Invest. Eco Invest is a program of our national treasure. It's a blend finance program. The treasure put more or less 50% of the money, more or less $3 billion, and the private banks put $3 billion too. What we need in Brazil, I think Brazil is a particular case, is cheap money because our interest rates are very, very high for international standards. That's a structural problem in Brazil. So with catalytic money from treasure, we could reach $6 billion to begin, 10% of our targets. And we are talking with JICA from Japan to put more $1 billion in catalytic money to do other auction of Eco Invest. But our treasure have limits to put money. We don't have much money to subsidize these operations. So we are looking for other models. Okay. We are looking for other models such as equity funds or long-term barter, pay with products, with exchange rates and price of the products with some range predefined. And I think we'll have to work with different models. Blend finance, Eco Invest is the man, but equity funds and other models we are looking for, we are creating.
Thank you, Pedro. So, just trying to understand a little bit. So, it's we're creating a market through the public funding.
Yeah.
Your guarantees of low interest rates, also protection against exchange rate volatility. Are there any policies that are making it easier for maybe investors to see how they're going to, the enabling policy in the regulatory environment?
No, the Brazilian Green Way is a government policy, but we don't have any tax advantages or other incentives The eco invest is only the cheap money from the treasury, 1% a year, was all the incentive we need to do that auction, because as I said, it's a profitable business in Brazil.
Thank you. Wendy, you spoke a little bit about the role that your team within the CGIAR has been playing and how you're supporting the design of the investment vehicles, but also then the monitoring, verification, reporting and verification. What role, if you can maybe go into a little bit more detail, can the digital mapping and the climate smart technologies play in mobilizing this finance?
Sure. So one of the things about investment, right, is that you need to make sure that you're going to have that financial return. And I think you were mentioning, right? So to be able to ensure that as best as possible with the data gaps that we have tools that allow us to then first measure the risk that an investment may cause. So once we look at potential climate hazards for a potential business model that is asking for a loan to the bank, that is looking to be part of an impact investment fund mechanism, we need to try to assess the type of risk that that's going to cause to investors. Following that understanding, then we have access to our CGIAR repository of information and data, and again, 30 years of research that has been basically put in databases, and we are accessing now with artificial intelligence models so that we can understand what types of recommendations can be suggested to those investments to mitigate that risk. So in that sense, we are opening access to finance for businesses that did not used to be eligible for credit lines because they were seen as too risky, right?
And it's not just AI, no? You're then bringing in scientists from different fields and perspectives to be able to go through and validate and design. Maybe if you can touch on that.
Sure. So different mechanisms will have different needs, right? In the case of the Amazon Biodiversity Fund, because it was investments that were earmarked for biodiversity conservation, it really needed robust primary data collected in these business models. So there we actually invested in also allocating funding to go to these businesses, collect soil samples to measure biodiversity. So that type of mechanism for that specific fund had data collection and TA support that it implicates going to the field and taking measurements. We also use remote sensing approaches and modeling, state-of-the-art type of analysis to monitor areas that should be conserved. You know, in Brazil, there's the forest code and farmers need to conserve a certain amount of forest. So those areas should not be touched. But in cases like the Rio Terra case business model, where there's actually an activity of restoration with remote sensing, instead of having to go to each individual farm and measuring hectare per hectare, we can use remote sensing approaches to measure the restoration that is happening by looking at the vegetation that is being planted and growing and how that's changing different KPIs, among them the connectivity of these fragmented landscapes. So there's business fund mechanisms that may require more robust data collection approaches. And then there's other type of funding mechanisms like the FASA funding that we are also part of, which is Farming in Africa for Sustainable Agriculture in the fund that is continental for different countries in Africa, where we're actually using a mechanism where AI, whereby then just looking at repository information, we can estimate the potential impacts. So there, because it's a larger fund in terms of funding, extent, country, stakeholders, it doesn't make sense to go collect, farm by farm information data, but there we have instruments that have been developed to collect information from the private the partner financial institution And in a way that is self-reported, we can then look at the AI source of information to understand what are the type of impacts that those activities are having. So it really is a fund-dependent science approach mechanism to respond to the different demands the different investors may have in these different financial instruments.
Thanks, Wendy. Andrea, so the Amazon Fund's not your only fund of your institution. I mean, what are the barriers that are really preventing the greater flows of private finance into land restoration? And from your experience, how can we begin to overcome them?
Great. Thanks for the question. I would like to cover some different angles of the question. First, the way we see, when you think about nature-based projects or restoration or agroforestry projects, they are very high CapEx intensive. If you think about CapEx, of course, the project is very different. It's not comparable because you have all the natural aspect and the social aspect, but you could like very distant comparison, but just for us to have an idea, think about like building a road, the amount of money you would need, mobilization of people. It's a big project, these restoration projects, and they can be done more like community-based or more like industrialized, large-scale based. So when you look at the needs of capital, and I talk about like 250 million reais, $50 million fund, it can look very big fund for Brazilian standards and impact investing, but actually 20 million reais or between $1 to $5 million US that we can invest in each project is just the beginning of the project. We are normally one of the first or the first commercial investors on the project in order to prepare them for scale. And then I met your question. And we were, for those projects to really scale and thrive, they will need commercial capital, additional rounds of funds so that they can get a minimum scale. And I was this morning in another table with big financial cooperatives in Brazil and in the other day with banks. And they were bringing up some of the risks they perceive, for example, fundiary risk or scalability risk, guarantees. And some of them, this is very interesting when we think how we move investments from a small scale, which impact investing fund can do, to the big banks ecosystem. So these are like, these answers, they are not 100% answers. Journey is also of the financial institutions to look at the projects in the field and understand a bit more their needs. And we do have progress here in Brazil. The Brazilian Development Bank, which had before difficulties, right, in funding, even with Fundo Clima, which is a subsidized line, these restoration projects, now they have announced several of the projects. They have learned the technology of using even the carbon credits that are going to be generated at some point. This will be the guarantee for the investment. So this is the type of discussion and implementation we will need on the field. A lot of flexibility. And I would like also to add, for example, in ABF, the incentives are aligned. The end remuneration of the managers and of the executives is not just linked to the carried interest of the fund, which is normally the rule of the market, but also to the impact targets that are going to be achieved. So having this type of cross incentives in the market, you know, we do have very brilliant people out there. We don't lack talent or creativity. Maybe we lack also a bit of incentives aligned.
Imagination.
Sorry?
The imagination around the incentives.
Exactly. Yes, because to be honest, the capital already exists in scale, right? And we do have good projects and potential entrepreneurs in the field which are doing great work. But the way we are going to connect those two, it's not given yet. So it's something we will need to sit down to learn and to design. So for me, what's missing for us to reach scale will be this cross the bridge between where the capital is and the needs in the field, and aligning incentives, overcoming the risks. Yes, it's a bit of the way.
Thank you, Andrea. So I'm going to go to Sebastian, but before I go to Sebastian, I want to know if there are any questions from anyone in the audience. I knew there was a question somewhere.
Thank you very much. My name is Monica. I am representing Safe Soil Movement. Among others, we're supporting driving policies for regenerative agriculture via some projects we also carry in India. I have two questions. I will share and you can see if it makes sense to. One is in these models, we have the economic or financial KPIs, we have the social and environmental, but have we tried to actually put a monetary value in the positive externalities that are generated, for example, with regenerative agriculture that are benefiting basically society or the region, etc.? Have we tried to embed those as part of the model to justify the value in a more concrete way? And the second is about the sustainability of the activity. So for the farmers to be able to repay the loans, sometimes it takes years for, especially in agroforestry, right, for the returns to come. And there may or may not be a market also for their produce in a medium long. In any way, are you supporting also to find those suppliers and match them with the farmers so that there's a network that keeps this going? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Maybe we can take two and then go back. And if you could just say who you are and the organization.
Thank you so much. I have a question for you, ma'am. I'm Farhan Ahmed, and I'm working as a manager UN at National Disaster Management Authority of Pakistan. I would like to, ask from you, how did you incorporate the localization factor to, more to make the projects or to make the finances more sustainable? Yes, the localization factor, yes. That the local knowledge and the localization factor that makes the project more valuable and more sustainable. So how did you cater for in this financial mechanism this factor localization? Thank you.
Okay, so we have three questions. We have one about how do we incorporate the externalities into the positive externalities into the planning. The second question is around other parts of the value chain. So maybe the second part, I'll go to our two banking sides, positive externalities, either of you two, and then also on the localization. So who wants to start?
Thank you. Thanks for your questions. Very interesting. So let's start with the localization. So a lot of these funding mechanisms, they're looking to support local value chains and local communities. So we're talking about them bringing that finance, from different investors, global, banking systems to the communities through agri-SMEs. The work that we developed here in Brazil over the last 5 years had two different components. One was the ABF fund, which is basically supporting local agri-SMEs that work with local farmers, bringing them into the business model and them receiving capacity building capabilities, sometimes CapEx materials for turning a system into an agroforestry system, training. So they are part of the supply chain that is now receiving finance indirectly or directly through capacity building, or sometimes with inputs for converting their systems, food systems, into sustainable activities. So that is very clear. The other part of the work that we were doing here in Brazil involved supporting startups that were sustainable, that were promoting different value chains. You're here in Berlin, you may be trying the acai, the copuaçu, the frumes, the babaçu. All those are fruits that are native to the region, And there's different business models that are trying to bring them to the market. So by strengthening those markets that are supporting those local value chains is another way to localize or do localization in terms of the benefits of bringing finance to communities. So those are very clear examples of how that works.
Externalities, you or Pedro?
Well, about externality, we are studying. We have the environment benefits very mapping. The labor benefits more or less. The certification, etc., is very okay. But the number of jobs we can create, for example, we are working that number. GDP increase, etc., etc. It's a work in progress. But and about the time, sustainability and markets, in our case, is a specific case. We are talking about mainly livestock, corn and soy bean. The time for soil and corn to repay, we calculate about 6 years, 7 years more or less. Livestock 5 years maybe, but forests 10 years, or agroforest 15 years, for 20 years. But we don't have any problem about financial sustainability, and we cannot see a market problem in the future, because these products will be more sustainable products. So I think the markets buy these products, prefer to buy these products.
Thank you, Pedro. But we got two more aspects of this. I see the team is looking at me on time. Andrea, you're going to come in on the point, and then I have a last question to you, Sebastian, after Andrea, and it's going to be, you have fellow impact investors or fellow financial people, you have researchers, you have governments, and I want to know, what is it you need from us to be able to build these products and incorporate all of the aspects of them? So I'm going to give you a little bit of a heads up to think about it, and I'll hand you the microphone.
Very easy question. I just want to come to your question on time and access to market. The easiest, not the easiest, but access to market is also embedded on the thesis of the investment. For example, the agri SMEs that when they were talking, all of them also has this role of accessing the market. And we have already initial results. For example, for cacao, we do have companies which are contracting with Cargill and then offering even a premium price for this. And there is a share of revenue between the company and the agriculture and the families. We do have international chocolatiers also interested in the cacao. We do have different companies potentially interested in sustainable oil. So this is part of the thesis, and this is a crucial point. And the other, in terms of timing of the investment, this is a very good question. And we have learned over the years, our team do this type of NBS investments for more than 10, 15 years. And what we've learned is that you cannot accelerate, right? The growth of the trees, so the carbon curve, you do not speed it up, or the commodities. But you can use mechanisms which are quite common in the agri market, like future sales, monetizing future streams of revenue, and use the same mentality to adapt the longer cycles of the sustainable agroforestry systems and carbon repayments. Even to our case, it's a 10 years fund. Now we are in the last year of the investment period, meaning we do have 5 years ahead. But when we are exiting, we need to exit by 2030, 2032. But then there will still be a stream of revenue of natural assets, commodities. So it's also using what we have available in the market to match the times of nature with the time of capital.
Thank you. And Sebastian, so over to you. What do you need? You're in the value chain, if you like, and there's there are farmers, there are governments, there is researchers. And what do you need from us to be able to move, to go back home to the Federation of French banks?
So as commercial banks, what we are looking for, obviously, are bankable projects because we want to finance things, companies and projects that are bankable. But bankable projects that respect a certain set of criteria, especially criteria related to sustainability. And in our case, it's obviously, we want to make sure that what we finance do not create deforestation and do not generate land degradation. And that's quite tricky. So for this, we need, first thing, something that you mentioned, we need to fill the data gaps. So we need science to define what are the right ways to measure things on the ground. How can we measure efficiently the land, the soil quality, the land degradation, these kind of things? How can we measure all this, and how can we transmit these KPIs from the smallholders all along the value chain, so to the agro-business and ultimately to the client and the bank and to the bank. So yes, filling the data gaps, creating metrics, KPIs, measures on the ground, and traceability along the value chain. So that's one thing. And what we need from public authorities, we need them to create a legal framework that reduce as much as possible the risk of deforestation, so that as banks, we can be quite comfortable with the fact that if we finance a project in this region, for instance, there is no deforestation because the public authorities make sure that deforestation is not possible in this area. And in the end, what we need, what we've seen today during this panel, is that it's really multi-stakeholders partnership that we need. And it's quite tricky because when you gather scientists, public authorities, the smallholders, and investors, at the beginning of the day, they don't speak at all the same language. So it's very difficult, but we try together to define common language to make sure that everybody understands its partners to work in the same direction, that is zero deforestation, no land degradation, and these kind of things.
Thank you. So I'm going to end this session now. Thank you for coming along. RAIZ will be launched officially at the Ministerial on the 19th at 10:30. Exactly. And there's a press conference afterwards. That was good, no? And I hope that together with our partners here, we'll be able to learn a new language together with the smallholders, the language of banks, the language of smallholders, the language of policy, and the language of research. Thank you.